Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the A24 Project, where every 2 weeks we look at two films in chronological order from the A24 filmography, and in between we try and interview the talent involved. And joining me this week, he doesn't just come at night, he's coming in your ears. It's Dallas King. How are you?
I'm very, very well, but that does sound much... Actually, no, it probably sounds as filthy as you probably intended it, doesn't it?
I'm only looking at... Oh, yes.
Yeah,
there we go.
Now you see the problem.
So this week we're going to be looking at It Comes at Night and A Ghost Story, so quite the double bill today. So first up, we have some new interviews to announce. So we had a change in scheduling and dropped an interview last week with Adam Pearson, who plays the disfigured man in Under the Skin. And in addition to our upcoming interviews with Chris Bergeok, the co-writer of The Florida Project, and Guy Nativy, the Academy Award winner behind Skin, we've got Catherine Olivier from 8th grade. We now have Krisha Fairchild joining us from, Krisha, and Katie Chang, who plays Rebecca, the lead in The Bling Ring. So some exciting interviews to come. So as it stands at the moment, we are pretty much going to be a weekly podcast all the way through until mid-December at this point. So very exciting for the show.
Absolutely. And, I always feel that we really need to change all our promotional material that says fortnightly. I think we need to basically say we're now a weekly podcast. We'll get 2 reviews one week and then an interview with the next week, especially if, fingers crossed, actually by the time this one drops, it will be during the film festival. So who knows, we might be able to hopefully secure some A24 talent in that and be able to continue our streak well into the new year.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be really excited to do that. It blows my mind that we get people to come on and talk about A24 films, and I can promise you some exciting interviews ahead. The Krisha Fairchild one, the Chris Bergeok one, we're talking about like 80 minutes worth of chat, and the Krisha Fairchild one will make an interesting companion piece to one of the films we're talking about today. So yeah, look out for those ones in the coming weeks and months, and hopefully we continue to add to them. So keep an eye on our Twitter feed at Join Nerd Pie for any news about additional interviews that we record. But I think you mentioned it there, the London Film Festival. So St. Maud has been added to the A24 filmography, and it'll be dropping at the London Film Festival, and it's received great attention at Toronto. So I know this is a film we're both really looking forward to. So this psychological horror film from first-time director Rose Glass follows a pious nurse who becomes dangerously obsessed with saving the soul of her dying patient. So Dallas, I know this one was on a recent episode of Filibuster, one of your must-see films of the London Film Festival. Why has this one got you excited, and why do you think, from what little we know at this stage, A24 is taking a punt on it?
Is it too sort of harsh to basically say the reason it made my list is because A24 picked up it?
I think that would be acceptable.
I think, especially given which podcast we're in, I think it's acceptable. It was something that I'd read the synopsis of sort of when the film festival brochure was first announced. It sounded interesting, but there was maybe other films I was prioritising. But then when I saw that A24 had picked it up for distribution in America, suddenly I went, oh well, now I've got to go and see it, because that's who we are. And it sounds quite interesting. It sounds like a potential sort of psychological thriller, maybe sort of shades of sort of The Exorcist or something in there as well. And they've done a great job picking up on there's, I guess, is it psychological? No, or it's elevated horror, I think, is what A24 are best at, with the likes of Midsummer and Hereditary, and even one of the films which we were looking at today, so It Comes at Night. So they've got a great back catalogue in that. So clearly there's something that they've seen in this film which sort of fits that genre, and so that makes me very excited.
Yeah, this one's got me keen as well. I almost can't sort of compare it with, like, we're coming from this sort of British film as well, and I think of something like In Fabric, which was at the 2018 London Film Festival, which got picked up by A24. This sort of kind of small British, elevated horror, unique kind of cult film that you can imagine playing well with the Midnight Crew. And I think something like this I can almost see some parallels between that and In Fabric, which is still to be released in America. We are, in a rare occasion, we got to get this one first and quite a bit in advance. It's already out on Blu-ray now here, but I can sort of see a bit of a resemblance between these two films, and I'm really excited to see that one at the film festival, and hopefully by this point when this episode drops we will have seen it.
I'm actually very excited to see what the Americans make of In Fabric, because it's very British and totally bizarre. But I'm really keen to see what they make of that one when it finally gets released.
Definitely. And talking about releases, this episode, I suppose this will date it for when you finally hear it. The Midsummer has dropped in America on Blu-ray and on iTunes USA. So, as is always the case with this podcast, any news and updates are always immediately out of date by the time we've recorded and edited the podcast. And on the last episode, of our film Canography look, I predicted that Midsummer would not come to director's cut in the UK because it wasn't on the BBFC. And lo and behold, 24 hours later, it was announced that it would be getting released on UK Blu-ray. So there we go. I've been made to look like an absolute mug by this feature. We just need to bin it.
No, I think it is very useful. But with that particular episode, I think I actually did say, I think I said that they were going to release it. They just were too, in the British word, tight in order to pay for a BBFC certificate for the cinema release and the DVD release. So I think that's what they got. I was always hoping for, because, I know that you've pre-ordered it on iTunes. I am always a stickler for physical media, so I have pre-ordered it off Amazon because it's confirmed that it's going to be the original cut and the director's cut. So I'm looking forward to getting that. So it's released in the UK 28th of October here. So very excited to finally watch that. And I saw on Twitter earlier this week I'm really excited to go back and watch this film again, because someone's noticed that in one of the scenes where Florence Pugh becomes the May Queen and they pick her up, you can actually see her dead sister's face with the exhaust tube in the trees behind her. And I mean, I was always looking in the background of that film for like the paintings on the walls in the lodge that they were staying at, but it looks like there's going to be so many levels of detail in this film that I'm very excited to get back and rewatch this one.
Yeah, when it was announced, I'd pre-ordered this on iTunes USA, and then when it was announced last week that it would be coming out on UK Blu-ray, I cancelled my iTunes pre-order and went with the UK one, even though it kind of comes out a month later. But then today I decided, I was like, I really want to be able to see it as soon as possible, and I will buy the Blu-ray eventually. So I was like, nope, I'm going to, it worked out like with the exchange rate, which slightly improved today. I was like, it's only 12 quid. Why don't I just buy it now from iTunes USA, because I just want to be able to watch it, and then at some point I'll buy the Blu-ray. So I cancelled my Amazon pre-order from the UK and then went back to America. So I'm certainly flip-flopping between the two.
Oh, I'm sure if you like it enough on iTunes, you might eventually get the Blu-ray of it, especially if it comes out at some point in a really nice sort of steelbook. I'm sure you will, yeah, with the paintings on it or something. I'm sure you'll cave in and buy it again.
Oh, absolutely. And to date this episode of when it gets recorded, the Uncut Gems trailer actually dropped before we even recorded this episode. But we're going to hold over our reaction to the next episode, where we're actually going to be reviewing the Safdie brothers' other film, Good Time, along with Menasha. So to get our sort of trailer reaction, we'll hook you in into the next episode. So look out for that thoughts in a couple weeks' time. But just a quick tease, Dallas, excited by the trailer?
Yes. Quick tease.
Yeah, me too. We'll see you next week. So we'll kind of dive into our two movies for this week. It Comes at Night and A Ghost Story. So Waves writer-director Trey Edward Shults follows up Krisha with It Comes at Night. So secure within a desolate home as an unnatural threat terrorises the world, the tenuous domestic order he has established with his wife and son is put to the ultimate test with the arrival of a desperate young family seeking refuge. So despite the best intentions of both families, paranoia and mistrust boil over as horrors outside creep ever closer, awakening something hidden and monstrous within him, as he learns that the protection of his family comes at the cost of his soul. So Dallas, when did you first see It Comes at Night, and what was your reaction?
I saw this one on release in the cinema. I remember it had a very effective trailer and marketing campaign, particularly in the UK, with lots of shots of this ominous red door at the end of the corridor and what lay beyond there, and the sort of shots of these infected people and stuff like that. So I was already hooked. I mean, I love a sort of genre thriller that sort of deals with these kind of things, such as the sort of 28 days and 28 weeks later, I think, is one of the most underrated sequels of all time. I think it's actually great. And also Steven Soderbergh's sort of Contagion as well is another underrated thriller that deals with the more sort of bureaucratical side of how you deal with an outbreak or something like that. I mean, you've got Outbreak as well, but I think it's a bit more on the cheesy sort of Hollywood blockbuster side. But this was something that hooked me in. Wasn't familiar with the filmmaker at that point, but Joel Edgerton I'm a fan of. I think this was coming out a couple of years after Warrior, where he really impressed me, and yeah, I was blown away in the cinema. This was one of my films of the year. It just missed out on my top 10. It was a very competitive year, but I think I actually extended my official top 10 to an 11 to include it because I thought it was that good. What about yourself?
Yeah, I was a bit less enthusiastic than you, and I sort of rewatched it recently, so I saw it as well in the cinema, and I was really sold on the trailers, which got me really quite interested, and I was quite hooked in. For me, I was sort of more thinking of Joel Edgerton, sort of from the recent film, The Gift.
Yeah.
It was the year of the G, and I remember he had directed this movie. I was really gripped by it. It was a complete surprise. And until that point, I was sort of like, had no strong opinions on him as an actor, but that film and that performance really got me in. So I kind of went into that one with the sort of the good vibes of that film, and I just never sort of particularly got into it in the film. Whereas sort of Krisha, which was a recent sort of first time watch for me, I liked the characters in it. I found the family drama quite tense, and I liked how that kind of unfolded. Here, I just wasn't really gripped at all by any of the characters or anyone sort of involved in the film, which was disappointing. And you know, I like that there's a tension and an ambience within the film. I like the dog, but in terms of the human characters, it just didn't go anywhere for me. And sort of the drama sort of, you know, or the threat kind of outside the house never gripped me enough, and it was just a film that sort of left me sort of thinking like, this is a bit of a 2.5-star film, which seems to be completely opposite to yourself.
Yeah, no, I think I went with the full 5 stars for this one actually. I mean, it was nice to see a nice sympathetic dog character, given some of the other films that we've watched from the A24 project. It definitely was not a Nazi dog. It was a very loyal, protective dog. So that was good to see. But you could kind of tell that this was one of those films where, you know, if they kill this dog, then, you know, all bets are off as to what's going to happen. But, you know, so you've got the two. I actually thought there was a nice sort of build up between the two families. You start off with Joel Edgerton and sort of Carmen and Giorgio and their son in this house. They just had to bury their father, and you know, then as always, you know, there's another family gets involved, and it's Christopher Abbott, who is, I never really liked in Girls. He is a total asshat in that, but I really thought his character and acting work was fantastic. And a little scene film called James White from a few years ago. I highly recommend that one if people can check that one out. But, you know, this guy comes in, breaks into the house, but apologises, saying he's looking for food and stuff for his family. So they take the family in, but then, of course, there's this, as you said, this mistrust and paranoia between the two. And I was just looking at the notes that I'd written down for this movie, and I just basically had almost one sort of line written, which is, humanity is fucked. We are far too selfish to put the human race above ourselves. And, you know, it's kind of true. And what I actually admired about the film was that it essentially does in 90 minutes what every single season of The Walking Dead does over like sort of 12, 13 episodes. And that the group of people find a place, they make it secure, then other people come along, they take them in, they eventually decide that they don't like each other, they destroy the place, and then they have to move on. And that's kind of what happens here. You know, sorry for spoiling anything there, but you can tell that it's like Krisha, it's sort of, you can tell that it's working towards a confrontation and a pivotal moment where the powder keg is going to explode. And I think it does it really well. I thought the acting was great, and all of the characters' actions seemed believable in the situation. And what I actually really appreciate about the film is it didn't give you any easy answers. You know, it never explains why, you know, this sort of plague or infection, the origins of it, how it actually sort of, you know, gets into the body and affects people. And I really appreciate the ambiguity of it, similar to the A Quiet Place, where they never really gave an answer as to why the monsters were there. They just are, and that is the world that we're living in. So I really sort of liked that and appreciated that. And this is a world that potentially I would like to, similar to A Quiet Place, I wouldn't mind exploring a bit more in, I think.
Yeah, I just wish I was sort of as enthusiastic as you to give it 5 stars. That's such high praise, and it just, as I say, I think I'm really looking forward to Waves. I liked Krisha. This one just sort of maybe just left me a little kind of uninterested. And I think things you touched on there is that parallels between other films, whether it's A Quiet Place, The Walking Dead, etc. Just a lot of this film, I think it's a well-made film. I think it has the best of intentions, but for me, I was just sort of like, I've seen these sort of familiar tropes played before, and oh yeah, okay, I really like that sort of there was a whole mystery element. Like, they didn't dive into what's this plague or what's kind of going on out there. I just kind of like that, but it's like, again, I've seen that sort of done better perhaps before, and this whole sort of family invasion, this family living a sort of best lifestyle that they can in sort of terrible situations, and then it all goes wrong when a mysterious family or stranger kind of gets involved. It was just like, I've kind of seen it all before, and I just couldn't sort of get over that sort of having done it all before. It just felt, with sort of A24 films, I'm always looking for something that bit different or that bit new, and this one just felt like a bit of a well-worn film for me.
No, I certainly appreciate that, but I mean, I think it's actually nice. I think this is actually probably one of the first films where we've actually really differed in our opinions on. We're normally quite close in terms of ratings, but this is certainly one which has divided us, which is great to see, and to be able to have this discussion and to sort of analyse the good points and bad points. And I think we're both making sort of valid arguments, and it'd be interesting to hear what the audience have to say about this film if they have seen it. Just please let us know where you fall on it. But what I really appreciated, and which is why especially I'm excited for Waves at the London Film Festival, is I really like some of the filmmaking choices he made. There's several sort of fever dream sequences that the boy has at night, and perhaps that it comes at night refers to these sort of dreams or visions that he's having. Potentially it could be the disease taking over, but I really like the way that for most of the film, when it's the sort of family and stuff, it's sort of in a sort of tight, sort of flat 180 shot in terms of ratio, but then when it goes into the dream sequences, it actually expands out into scopes and sort of 2-3-5. So I really like the shifts in perspective of that, in order to try and sort of figure out if you're in the dream world or the real world. And I really like the sort of visual touches he had there. And yeah, it's exciting to see the buzz coming out for Waves, and I think he's a filmmaker of real talent and promise, and hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe a future guest as well on the A24 project. So Trey, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on to discuss it.
Yeah, and I think it should be said that this is much like Krisha, which was heavily inspired, and you'll hear more about that in a few months' time with our interview with Krisha Fairchild. Obviously, Krisha was based on the death of a family member that related to Trey, and again, this sort of has kind of followed that sort of step as well. And Trey began writing this film after the death of his father as a way of dealing with the pain. So clearly a very personal filmmaker. Do you sort of see that in this film now that you sort of, I don't know if you knew that going in or in your research afterwards, did you sort of know about that, and do you see that sort of reflected in the writing and perhaps the character of Paul?
I didn't know that actually until now, actually, until you just mentioned it. But I guess I can see it because it does start, the film starts with the death of a father figure. Carmen and Giorgio's father is the one that's put to rest at the beginning of the film, and it's about this sort of the slow dissolution of the family unit. Joel Edgerton's character is the father. He has to take on that role, and he's doing everything he can to keep the family together under the most intense and almost futile circumstances. And the other character he meets as a father. So sort of looking back at it, certainly adds a new dynamic and a new twist on it, and it's certainly something I'd love to take into a rewatch of it in the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So obviously for you, you've rated this as a 5. Where does this sort of fall for you in sort of the A24 top tier to date?
In terms of to date, I'm just going by what we've watched on the A24 project, but I would say this is certainly in the top 10 for me, not top 5, but certainly in the top 10, probably around about the sort of 7 or 8 mark at the moment. I think very high, but where it will be in the final rankings, if we ever do have a final ranking, because this is a project which may never end, depending on how productive A24 are. We'll have to see in about a few months' time where it will fall. But yeah, for me, it's definitely top 10 A24 at the moment.
Yeah, so I think we've kind of wrapped up It Comes at Night. So I think it's about time that we come to A Ghost Story. So David Lowery's masterpiece. A Ghost Story sees a recently deceased white-sheeted ghost, played by Casey Affleck, return to a suburban home as he tries to reconnect with his bereft wife, who's played by Rooney Mara. So Dallas, what was your first experience and reaction to this film? And I'm more curious, what was your reaction, what was your expectation going in?
This is a film which I saw with my wife. We went to see it in Cineworld on release. It was one that I think it was quite difficult in order to find, because it was quite a small release, but I did manage to find it at Cineworld, and it was one which I remember now. I'm specifically remembering because I think it was filmed in Academy ratio or even 1-to-1 ratio, and a lot of cinemas. It was released in London before it went on a nationwide release, and there were several people complaining about the fact that it was projected incorrectly where they saw it in London. So I was basically watching to make sure that it was being played in the correct ratio, and it wasn't. So I had to go out, speak to someone to get it played in the correct ratio, and that meant I was able to enjoy it. But this was a film which I was looking forward to, and I thought David Lowery is a great filmmaker, but I did have some slight apprehensions to it, because certainly the trailers and everything made it look very Terrence Malick-y, and I am not a Terrence Malick fan. I love A Thin Red Line, but everything from A Tree of Life onwards I've basically hated with a passion. But I will still go and see his films because they always have a great cast, so I'll always give him the benefit of the doubt, and I always end up being disappointed. And it's always this sort of wistful, longing voiceovers, this sort of shots of pixie girls dancing in fields of wheat and stuff. And there were moments in the trailer for A Ghost Story that I thought, oh no, this could be the exact same thing. But against all the odds, even though it is that kind of film, I fell completely for this film, and it was one of my favourite films of that year, and it is one of my favourite A24 films. I just think it is just one of the most beautiful, soulful, melancholic, but strangely uplifting films which I've seen in the sort of past 5 years, and it's one of my favourite A24 releases. And yeah, before we get into the heart of it, I guess, what were your first reactions to it? And by the way, I'm just going to start eating a pie while you do that, because I've got a pie similar to Rooney Mara in the film, and I was going to try and eat the entire pie during this review and hopefully not throw up.
The audio of this podcast, the audio nature of podcast is clearly wasted on you. We should have live streamed this. You can get some sort of Periscope thing on the go now. For me, it was quite interesting, actually. Like I was really looking forward to this one. Like, there seemed to be a lot of buzz about this film for quite a while before it sort of made its way to the UK general public, and I remembered sort of seeing the trailer quite a few times. It seemed to be a sort of pretty popular one, and I was really keen to see this one. I liked the boldness of it, and I wanted to see what David Lowery would do with it. So I remember watching the trailer a lot, and then going in and being really surprised by where all the film went. And what's actually surprising is I rewatched the trailer before doing this episode, and you see the images of the ghost in the future, the past, all these sorts of things. And I never sort of realised that, I never expected those things going in. I think I just let the trailer wash over me, sort of the feel of it. I was so focused on this ghost that I never sort of thought, why is there a ghost sort of with like early American settlers? Why is there a ghost in this sort of like big building? I never sort of thought about those things. So when it happened in the film, I was completely surprised by where the film went. I think it is a masterpiece, and I think the fact that this film was made for 100,000 is just an absolute testament to David Lowery, that he followed up like days after finishing Pete's Dragon with a film like this was just incredible. It shows why David Lowery is such an exciting filmmaker, and it very much feels like that old adage, one for the big studios or one for me, that he goes and makes, Pete's Dragon, this insanely popular Disney film. I haven't seen it yet myself, but then he follows up immediately with this such a personal and passion project with something that was kind of shot secretly because they didn't even know how it would pan out, and at £100,000 it was pretty much risk free for a director like that. I just think this is what this sort of A24 filmography is all about. I just think this stuff just makes me truly excited to be talking about it, to be reviewing it, and to have chances to revisit it and discuss it.
Yeah, no, the sort of moments where, no, sorry if you haven't seen A Ghost Story, but
I can't believe you're actually in
I know
the
you
pie.
can actually kind of hear it. I can see the audio going on the microphone. So people, you say, I am eating the pie. I'll give a photo update at the end, and I've got a shot at the beginning. I'll see how much I get through, but I don't want to be rude and talk with my mouth full, so I'm making sure that I'm finishing off before you come back to me. But
God knows what you're going to do during our good time episode.
well, you'll just have to find out in 2 weeks, I guess. But I mean, it's not really it's spoilers. It's not really spoilers because there's a ghost in it, and the bit. I think we can go spoilers on this one. It's been a couple of years, so yeah, we're going to go spoilers. But surprise, Casey Affleck is dead. He's a ghost, but in a slightly different way to Bruce Willis, in that he just walks around in a sheet. And from what I can tell, it's Casey Affleck the entire way through. Now, to get an actor like Casey Affleck, who is a very good actor, everything else pushed aside, separating art from life, to get him to commit to that sort of role is fantastic, and he does a very good job of playing a sad ghost on a sheet. You can somehow gets that emotion through a sheet with two holes in it in a completely different way to, say, like Django Unchained. But when it gets to the sort of scene that you're talking about, where the ghost is essentially one of the cruxes of, I've heard a lot of things where ghosts are basically people who are unable to transfer to the other side because they have unfinished business. And he's clearly got something that he's wanting to say to his wife, or wanting to finish with his wife. And his wife, before she moves out of the family home, she's painting stuff, and she writes a little note, and then she puts it in a crack of the wood, and then she paints it over. And now this ghost spent ages trying to get this piece of paper out, and he goes through new families that come in. People sort of seem to crash and take over for parties and stuff. Then the house is torn down, and then a new skyrise is built in the place. And then he basically goes through time to the end of its point, where it suddenly folds back in on itself. And he starts again at the creation of the earth, and sort of going through sort of settler times, Indians and whatever, and then to the point where he can then finally read this note, and then it ends on just the perfect one of those where you just almost want to do a chef's kiss, a beautiful moment where he finally reads it. The audience don't get to see what it is, and then the sheet just falls to the ground. And then that's the movie over. And it's just like, it's one of those ones where what's written on the note is going to be what did Bob whisper to, Scarlett Johansson's character in Lost in Translation. It's that kind of debate you want to have with people coming out of the cinema. And, this is also a film. One of my favourite scenes is the scene where there's this party happening at this house, and there's a guy, just a random person who you haven't seen before in this film, who goes on this speech about almost the pointlessness of life and existence, all based around the tune of Beethoven writing Ode to Joy. And he has more lines in the film than Rooney Mara, Casey Affleck, and basically the entire cast combined. But it's just an incredibly compelling scene. And again, the audaciousness of this filmmaker to basically almost stop the ghost story in order to hear this sort of, again, another alternative take on life, existence. It's just amazing filmmaking and beautifully written as well, I thought.
Yeah, I'd read that sort of when they first started scripting this, that it was based on sort of, I have the kind of quote here that, so obviously what came first was the image of this ghost, and David Lowery was like, I just love that image. I love taking something that is understood to be funny or charming or sweet or naive and instilling it with some degree of gravity. And he had this image for years, and then finally the chance to use such a plot device came from when he and his wife got into an argument about moving back to Texas, and he started writing down this argument, thinking about his own attachment to physical spaces and sort of combining both ideas. He came up with the concept of the film quite quickly, and I'd sort of read that it was sort of 10 pages was originally the script for this argument, and they actually filmed it. And his wife was there on the set, sort of eye rolling a little bit, because it was like almost word for word this argument Lowery had with his partner, and they kind of stripped that all back. And as you say, Bonnie Prince Billy almost has the most kind of dialogue of any character in this film, and this house that they had actually found that actually resembled sort of the one sort of Lowery lived in with his wife. So such a personal film, and because the film was about to be demolished, the film crew were actually allowed to use it for free, and it's amazing what they're able to do with that house. It's not just the home of Mara and Affleck's character, but also that of other families who share Christmases and events, and they ultimately get to demolish the house on their own. It's just seems like such an incredibly personal film, and I remember just watching it and finding it quite emotionally, like the song goes, overwhelming. And I just think it's a movie like this is just absolutely amazing that someone with such an incredible and true vision has gone out and created this. And obviously I love a lot of A24 films, and I'd say it's almost between this and Under the Skin for like the most unique and original execution, visuals, and a piece of cinema. I think the one thing that maybe edges A Ghost Story out over Under the Skin, even though I would argue Under the Skin is probably the better film, perhaps just, is that this is completely from one person's mind, David Lowery, whereas Under the Skin is an adaptation from a source material. And I think these two films represent the best to date about that unique point of view that A24 do. And I think a lot of people, relatively speaking, went to see this film back on the back of seeing that vision sort of in that trailer. And then whether you liked the film or didn't, I don't think anyone can deny David Lowery's incredibly personal and film that I genuinely think is a masterpiece.
I completely concur. I think it is a masterpiece. It's in my top 3 A24 films. I've got It Comes at Night in the top 10, but it's up there with Under the Skin, like you say, and Moonlight for me as the pinnacle of what A24 are able to do. And I think this was one of the first sort of actual major Picture House Entertainment releases. Picture House are sort of, well, they were an independent cinema company, but then they sort of got bought over by Cineworld, but they moved into actual exhibition and distribution on certain films, and this was one of the first ones I remember, and they gave a really big push, and I think it really sort of helped get the sort of word out about it in the UK, and I think the film was really successful, certainly in terms of reaching its sort of target audience of sort of cinephiles and sort of people who like something a bit different. Obviously, it's not, if people say, "Oh, it's a ghost story," "Oh, it must be a horror film," it's nothing like a horror film. It's more of a dramatic sort of poem on longing and melancholy, because the ghosts, he meets another ghost who lives in the house opposite, and he sort of, at this, what I love as well is there's no dialogue between the two. It comes up in subtitles. It's just like hello, and it's like hello, and it's like I'm waiting on someone. And then when the house gets torn down, it's like one of the ghosts is like, I don't think they're coming, and then he disappears. The ghost has given up and has moved on to the other world. And yeah, it's just so heart-wrenchingly beautiful and poetic, and even like the little touches, like the song that Casey Affleck has written and performs in the film. It's just I've got that song on my sort of Spotify lists and stuff. It's one of my sort of favourite original songs from a movie from the last couple of years as well. I just think it's a beautiful piece of music to play, and whenever it comes on, I'm just sort of taken back to that experience of watching the film for the first time. And yeah.
I think you're spot on there. I love that song, and it's been a staple of playlists and things to listen to kind of ever since. I think it's a great score as well, and I think obviously you touched on the aspect ratio. Sort of Lowery's thinking was that it's about someone basically trapped in a box for eternity, and he felt that the claustrophobia of the situation could be amplified by the boxiness of the aspect ratios. And I remember what really shocked me was when obviously he goes into he lives to the future, and then he falls, and then he's in the past, and it's just that moment where he's with the early American settlers, and and you're sort of like the film continues to surprise you, and at this point you're like, oh my god, they're in the past. And then sort of when the Native Americans come along and kill these settlers, and then you see he's still there, and you've got these skeletons almost of the people that were there, and it blows your mind when you sit there thinking of, like, we all think about, oh, what would it be like to live forever, and this is probably the closest representation of someone to have lived an eternity and what that must be like. And you just sit there thinking, I think with the blankness of that ghost, you can project so much onto it. How do you feel in that situation? How are you meeting what he's going through? And it's ultimately you kind of putting everything that you want onto this ghost, and what must be going on behind that sheet. And I just remember just being really shocked in that scene where it was just like, wow, like, this film is incredible. Like, it's just such a bold decision to go into the future but then go into the past, and it's not just visiting the past, it's like this little moment in time, and it's just so sad.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, that I'm just now remembering, I can visualize that shot of it's the corpse of like a little girl settler who's then sort of her body sort of decomposes into skeleton and then into dust and into nothing, and all because the ghost is just waiting for that house to be rebuilt and for them to move in, to the point where he then makes noises and stuff, which then go hark back to the beginning of the film where they're woken up at night because the piano makes a noise, and it turns out it was the ghost. And I mean, like you say, it's potential to be sad, and watching a film like that where you can sort of see that, well, we're all going to die, we're all going to become worm food and stuff like that, it could be an incredibly depressing and send you into a sort of spiral of just sort of misery. But I think there's just something, I think it's executed so beautifully and with such emotion. Like you say, you can put yourself into the ghost because of the blankness of the sheet, that you can find the light and shade in it and the beauty of life. You can see the beauty of life, even though the skeleton disappears, but then flowers come up from it. So there is beauty in the sort of, I don't want to go into an Elton John Lion King circle of life movement, but there is that sort of thing that life will go on, so there is that. But I think he judges every moment in the film perfectly, that even though it could be an incredibly sad film, you come out of it, I certainly came out of it feeling rather positive and full of hope, I think, actually, in the end.
Yeah, like, I think one of the things we touched on earlier, and it would be doing a disservice if we're going through an entire A24 filmography and not touch on it, is the pie scene. So I think, like, going into this film, this was the part I'd heard the most about, that, like, oh, there's going to be a scene where Rooney Mara just literally eats a pie for a few minutes' time. What did you make of the infamous pie scene? For me, I just found it quite interesting just to watch her eating a pie. And I don't know about you, but, like, when you think of, like, funerals or heartbreaking events, it's sort of the mundane, like, that you remember. And I can imagine, and I've probably felt the same when I've been at a funeral, and you finally get that moment or so to yourself, and you just sort of just kind of drift away into something, whether it's watching a film or perhaps eating a pie. Like, I can understand the loneliness of just sitting and doing something, just being at one with the thoughts, and just finally perhaps just being able to breathe and relax. And I think that's what I see in that pie scene. What is it about for yourself?
I think, yeah, no, I mean, it certainly was the gif or meme worthy treatment of the film that everyone was talking about this pie scene. I'm able to now bring in a wrestling reference. Dwayne The Rock Johnson, when he was in the WD, would always go on about pie. Do you like pie? Pie being a reference for something else, and always asking people if they like to eat pie. And Rooney Mara certainly, well, for 4 minutes, I wouldn't actually know, maybe she doesn't enjoy eating pie. She's doing it more out of habit or just something to keep herself occupied from feeling what she's feeling. And people say, you eat your feelings, and she certainly does that, and to the point where she makes herself ill from it. But it's the kind of thing that I think there was probably maybe a few giggles in the screening I watched where it was like, oh, she's just going to be eating this pie then. But I think it then reaches that point, similar again to another terrible analogy possibly, but Team America, where the vomiting scene in the alleyway, where it starts off funny, goes past the point of funny, but then goes on again to the point where it's funny again. This is sort of incredibly sort of sad and moving and tender, but then gets into the point of, oh, they're really going to watch her do the whole pie thing. But then it gets to the point again where you're totally invested in her character and you're there with her as she does it, and then it results in she ends up being sick. But you really feel for her in that moment, that she's all alone and it's the only thing she has, and you can really feel the sort of pain and heart that she feels, even just through that silent sort of moment of the first time where she realizes that she is going to be alone at that point.
So obviously it's been a few years now since this film's came out, and obviously would be amiss to mention, like, this is our like artwork, this is on our stickers, this is like, you can download our episode, this is our little logo. What do you think the impact and legacy of It's a Ghost Story is? That I've noticed when I always ask whenever we have guests on, like, what are some of your favourite A24 films, and this one doesn't often pop up, and sometimes within the whole discussion about A24 films, people do talk on like the Spring Breakers, the Ladybirds, for example. Do you think this film sort of, it's greatly appreciated by people like ourselves, but is it perhaps as well known that this is an A24 film, or is this one that maybe people are still kind of haven't got around to seeing it? They're aware of it as a film, but maybe just haven't checked it out.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it doesn't get mentioned more often. Perhaps it's again, I'm just pulling really random connections out of my head here, but like in Pixar's Coco, they talk about how, for the people who've passed on to be remembered, people have to talk about them. And maybe it's the fact that maybe not enough people are still talking about it means that people are forgetting that it is in either A24's catalogue or it is as good as people remember. And I mean, we've rewatched it now and clearly still as powerful and important as it was on first viewing. So hopefully this podcast will get people rewatching the film and maybe sort of restart that discussion. But I think people will certainly revisit it when David Lowery returns to the A24 fold with The Green Knight in I think probably next year or the year after when it's finally released.
Yeah, definitely. So any final thoughts on our films today, Dallas? I think it sounds like this is a 10 out of 10 double bill for
This
you.
is actually a 10 out of 10 double bill. So I've been really looking forward to this episode, and it's been great to discuss, films which, are divisive, because, we don't always, it's nice to see that we're not just cookie cutters in terms of our opinions. We've got the exact same one. So it was nice to have a difference of opinion on one, but always good to see that, under the sheets, we're still exactly the same on our podcast stickers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really loved this double bill, and I'm so excited that we finally got to chat about A Ghost Story. And it's one of those things, will we ever get to interview someone from A Ghost Story, considering there's a cast of 3 high profile talents? I'm not too sure, but like it was so much fun to chat about this one today. And next week we're going to look at another 2 films, and ones that might actually kind of match this for quality, and that is Menasha and A Good Time. And we'll also have an interview with Alex Lipschultz, the co-producer and co-writer of Menasha, so quite something to look forward to next week. So Dallas, if people wanted to reach out to you to discuss this movie, where can people find you on the internet?
You can get me on Twitter at champcelluloid, and also the same on Instagram as well. And where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Lee_Nostromo. So thank you very much for giving up your time to talk with us. Hopefully it didn't feel like you were dragged through eternity for this one. And we'll chat with you in 2 weeks about Menasha and Good Time. Thanks for listening. Bye.